Now that the preparation is done, it is time to get started on your workpiece. Before you start to cut down the parts for your partition, you must plane all the wooden pieces and bring them to the required thickness and width. Select the side free from blemishes and knots. Use a jack plane to smoothen the face side and face edge flat. Use a tri-square to check if the edges are cut square. If required, smoothen it further. Mark them as the face side and face edge. All other measurements must be taken from either face side or face edge. Here we are making a half wall partition of 6 feet by 4 feet. Cut the wooden members to the requisite size. Then support the wooden piece on the bench top and using a portable saw, cut along the scribed line. Similarly, cut the other wooden piece in the same manner. Build the partition skeleton on the floor and raise it afterwards. To build the partition, you must place the studs between the top and bottom members as shown in the work drawing. Here we will use a combination of common mortise and tenon joints and stub mortise and tenon joint to assemble the partition. The studs will fit on the top and bottom rails with a common mortise and tenon joint, and the noggins will be fitted to the studs with the stub mortise and tenon joint. Step 1. To begin with, measure the position for each of the stud on the top and bottom rail. Using a tri-square and a pencil, mark out all the lines representing the center for the mortise groove for the placement of the studs. In all, you will make 5 such positions for the studs. Now measure and mark the width for the mortise grooves with the mortise gauge on all the 5 positions on both the sides of the top and bottom rails. Step 2. Secure the wooden piece firmly to the workbench with a G-clamp. Use a mortise chisel to start the cut in the middle. Then use a bevel edge chisel for the side cuts. Keep the combination of these two. Chisel down halfway through the mortise hole and clear out all debris from inside the mortise to leave a clean hole. Reset the workpiece to the other side. Chop out the waste in the same way till you meet the cutout from the other side. Similarly, chisel out all the mortise grooves on the top and bottom rails. Now, when you are done with the mortise grooves on the top and bottom rails, you need to carve in the stub mortise on the studs for the noggins to fit in. Step 3. Mark and carve the stub mortise grooves. Measure the position for the noggins on each stud and mark out all the lines on them. You will mark 12 such positions for the stub mortise on each of the 5 stud members as per the work drawing. Now, mark the width for the stub mortise grooves on all the positions on both the sides of the stud members. Secure the wooden piece firmly on the workbench with a G-clamp. Chisel out the stub mortise in the middle. Chisel down halfway through the mortise hole and clear out all the debris from inside. Similarly, carve out the stub mortise on all the stud members. Now that you have done all the mortise grooves, you need to work on the tenons to complete the mortise and tenon joints. Step 4. Mark and cut the tenons to size. Measure and mark the tenon length from the edge of one end of the piece and scribe the shoulder lines around all the edges. Adjust the Mortize gauge to the center and scribe a parallel line for the width of the tenons. Then, support the wooden piece to the bench top and start cutting with a handsaw along the waist side of the line till the shoulder line on both the edges. While cutting, take care not to overrun the shoulder lines. Reset the tenon member, cut down the edges on the other side. Then, secure the tenon member to the workbench with a G-clamp and chisel out. First, place a stud member with 2 grooves on the floor and apply glue onto the mortise and on the tenons of the noggins and start fixing them one by one and tap them. Similarly, use the same process for mark and cut the tenons to size. Step 5. Apply glue and assemble the partition. First, place a stud member with 2 grooves on the floor and apply glue onto the mortise and on the tenons of the noggins and start fixing them one by one and tap them lightly with a hammer to fit in. Remember, do not use the hammer directly on the workpiece as it may leave marks on them. Place a piece of a scrap wood in between. Then apply glue onto the tenons of the fixed noggins and into the mortise of the other stud member and fix it onto the tenon of the noggins. Remember, from now on, you'll need a helping hand to assemble the partition further. Similarly, keep fixing the noggins to the stud members part by part. Till you have fixed the last stud member of all the 5 members. Once done, ask a helper to help you rotate the frame so that you can fix it onto the top and bottom rails. Apply glue onto the tenon on the top side of the studs and place the bottom rail on top of it and tap the bottom rail lightly with a hammer till it fully sets in. Then once again rotate the frame and apply glue onto the tenon and place the top rail over it. Clamp the studs on the center with a T-bar clamp tightly so that the mortise and tenon members align properly with each other and tap lightly with a hammer till they fully set in. Before you move ahead, drive in some screws onto the joints. Place the frame onto the floor and drill holes on all the joints. While doing so, Fix the joints with a T-bar clamp. For the joints to fit in and the holes you drill for the screws are at the right place. Fix the screws and tighten it with a screwdriver. Do it on all the joints. Now you are done with your partition frame. Step 6. Mark the floor with chalk line. Measure the distance where you want your partition to stand up from the wall and put a temporary mark on the floor. Hold a chalk line string at one end of the mark and ask a helper to hold the string directly over the other mark. The string must be stretched tightly. Lift and snap the string from the middle. This will give you a straight line, a reference for your partition frame to stand. 7. Position the frame on the floor and align it to the wall. Place the partition frame on the chalk line. Ask a helper to lend you a hand. Position the frame so it sits flat on the marked line and perpendicular to the wall. Once in place, check if the frame is held straight against the wall. To do this, you will need a plumb bob. Hold the plumb bob from the top edge of the frame and allow it to hang at the bottom of the frame. Slow the plumb bob from swinging with your hand. Once it is still, the plumb bob should touch the frame slightly. Determine the distance from the string to the frame sides at both the top and the bottom. If required, adjust the frame until both are equal. Step 8. Secure the frame with screws. Once the frame is aligned, drill a hole on the frame and the wall and put the screws in place and tighten them to secure it. Then secure the bottom to the concrete floor in the same manner. Your low height partition is ready. Just one thing remaining to do, the finishing touch. Step 9. Give finishing touches. All you have to do is paint it according to the color of the wall and attach plywood sheets on top and the side edge. Paint the frame first with the matching color of the wall to match the rest of the room. When done, use a plywood sheet to cover the top and side of the frame. Ensure that each sheet is of the same width so that they are perfectly aligned at the edge. Use nails to attach the plywood. Make sure the top edge of the plywood is flush with the top edge of the top member. Now you are done. Go ahead and apply the plywood with the same color. Similarly, you can make other walls of a small cubicle. Doors can also be easily attached to a partition wall. Let's quickly look at the procedure once again. Step 1. Mark the position for the studs. Step 2. Carve out the mortise grooves. Step 3. Mark and carve the stub mortise grooves. Step 4. Mark and cut the tenons to size. Step 5. Apply glue and assemble the partition. Step 6. Mark the floor with chalk line. Step 7. Position the frame on the floor and align it to the wall. Step 8. Secure the frame with screws. Step 9. Give finishing touches.